And just a warm welcome to everyone. We're going to be recording today's session. So welcome to the November ACC IG process, all of our good stuff. As you know, PPKM Knowledge Management Interest Group. We are excited to have you with us today. We are honored to have a guest speaker join us from Freddie Mac, which, as you know, that is the same company as Andre Green, who is my co-chair. Say hi, Andre, to everyone.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking about information governance. And I'd like to introduce Sabrina Lozano, who's going to be introducing herself, and she'll give you a little bit of a background on herself. And she's got a great presentation lined up to talk to us, the legal ops professionals, about information governance. So as usual, we are going to go ahead and accept questions that are coming through the chat. We'll give everyone the opportunity to submit those as we're speaking. We will provide opportunities throughout the presentation for a moment of pause in which Sabrina will take some of the questions that have either come in on the chat itself, or if you'd like to state your question, please feel free. We'll keep all the lines unmuted for everyone, but please, out of the courtesy of the presenter itself, you can please mute your lines so there's no background noise. What else do we want to run through from a logistics perspective? We will allow a couple minutes at the end for KJ to make any updates or necessary updates with respect to ACC. And then I will probably close out by an announcement for what to expect in our year end, as well as the early 2020 timeframe, 22 timeframe. So with that, sorry, one more comment. We do have some pseudo poll questions that we're going to be asking the audience today. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough of an opportunity to get those all teed up within Zoom and the system itself. So we're going to conduct those through chat. So if you can find your chat, and as Sabrina asked those questions, if you want to type your responses, between myself and Andre will moderate, and we'll share that outcome and feedback to Sabrina. All right, I think we're ready to get going.
We're ready?
So,
all right.
Sabrina,
all right.
Take it away.
So thanks so much, Dina. I appreciate you and Andre inviting me here today to talk about information governance. It's probably one of my most favorite topics to talk about. I could probably talk about it for ages, but that just really goes to show how much I love this field and how interesting work is every day because of all the different challenges that we face. So, so a little bit about me. I've been in the field for over 20 years. I actually started off in high tech, working for a hard drive company, a disk drive company that was located globally in the US, Asia, and Europe. And it gave me great experience because I started off in litigation support. So back in the days then, we actually physically went out and searched for documents, we gathered them, and we interviewed witnesses around the world. And one of the things that we found was that it was pretty messed up from a records retention perspective. We didn't have a program, we didn't have anything built in. And so therein lies the seeds of what started me off in information governance. So I started the program at Seagate. It was a global program. We had it in about 12 different countries. So we had international records retention schedules. And we also had boxes everywhere, a lot of boxes. We cleaned up warehouses and we, did a lot of training. And so, so that's where I got my, I learned from the bottom up, if you will, and did a lot of projects. And eventually I moved into e-discovery, which is, at that time, a new field in the early 2000s. And I got to travel around meeting different companies, learning about their records retention issues to help them out in the event of an e-discovery and how to prepare for that, because back in those days, information governance really didn't exist. And I think in the last 16 years at Freddie Mac, I've been able to learn a lot about shifting from paper to electronic records and just really moving through a lot of the issues that many companies face. So today I'm going to talk about, what information governance is, what does it mean to a legal ops professional, and also talk about, some of the projects that we're seeing companies take on in this space, and then where are some of the tools that are available for addressing them. So, so I do want to make a disclaimer that today's discussion is based on my opinions and not those of my employer. So giving you the basic disclaimer there. All right. So the importance of information governance, there's a lot of reasons for why companies are undergoing a lot of the IG work that they are. And we're really seeing more and more organizations really develop this into a formal program. It's really an exciting space. I think with the convergence of so many things happening, we see ourselves with exponential growth of data. We know that there's volumes and volumes of it. One study that I ran into from IBM back in 2017, they said that information volume will double every 2 years, reaching 180 zettabytes by 2025. So if those of you don't readily know what a zettabyte is, it's basically 1 billion terabytes. So it's a lot of data. I think a lot of us are really facing with a lot of growth and asking ourselves the question, how do we minimize this? Another part of this equation for information governance is really about cybersecurity. There's been a lot of attacks. We see them in the news. There's ransomware attacks we saw with the Colonial Pipeline issue that happened earlier this year. But some of these attacks can really affect our infrastructure. And as such, you know, it's a big risk to our economy, to your business, and so forth if you do get these attacks. So we're really seeing a lot more companies pay attention to how to protect themselves from the outside as well as inside in terms of cyber attacks. And then with more data being in multiple locations, we're also seeing a lot of concern from consumers who are asking questions about, what about my privacy? You know, what about my information? And how long is it persisting out there? And so, you know, there's a lot more regulations and requirements to comply with them that's also impacting many companies and thinking about how they organize and inventory their information. We're seeing that through GDPR and also with CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And then we're also seeing from the e-discovery side, in terms of collecting data, finding data, there's a lot more places to go now. There's a lot more collaboration tools. I think many of us saw that come into our organizations through the pandemic when a lot of us were working more and more from home. And so the need to share information, collaborate effectively, you know, really brought on the introduction of many more new tools. And then for e-discovery purposes, there's just a lot more to go looking for data in. So we do find ourselves, you know, from an information governance perspective, there is a lot of complexity in the environment and a lot of things to think about. So one of the things that I think a lot of people ask is, what is information governance? So it's really been changing. I think a lot of the reasons why it's hard to define is because it is so multifaceted. And I ran into this pinwheel back with the information, IGI, Information Governance Initiative, at their SEGO Summit, and then it's gone on to be adopted by Robert Smallwood in his book. But it's basically a survey that's done annually that really looks at people's perceptions of what information governance is and what it encompasses. So one of the things that they ask about is, what are the elements within information governance? And as you can see from this pinwheel, it's pretty multifaceted. In the legal space and records and information management space, we see that 91% of respondents include that as one of the facets that they consider important to IG. And as you go through the pinwheel, you'll see like privacy and data storage and archiving, cybersecurity, all of those are pretty high in the 80s. And then it sort of moves over to the 70s on the left side of the wheel. And you see that to a great extent, most people view most of these topic areas as essential to information governance. And I think what's interesting about this is that it continues to change and shift, but ultimately we recognize that it takes a lot of people and from a lot of different areas to get something done in information governance. And I can tell you for a fact that the number of calls I have to deal with all the time is pretty high given the volume of people I need to talk to all the time. But it is interesting how this field has grown, and that's one of the reasons why it's a little bit hard to get our arms around it. The next slide is really about how does it affect the legal professional, legal operations professionals. So our team works within the legal division, and we actually operate on two levels. One is we're first line of defense, meaning that my team supports the legal division's records and information management program, along with privacy, access management, and also data governance. And then we also have another role, which is as second line, where we manage the enterprise records management program. And so, so we kind of look at these things and we think about how interrelated they are. So the teams that I work with, for instance, in the first one, assessing new technologies to determine governance rules. So that's an area where, as new technologies come in, I know many of my colleagues have, commiserated with me when Microsoft Teams came in, when Slack came into these environments, because there's a lot of discussion about what kind of rules do we need to manage this type of software, as well as the data and how people are interacting. And the litigation side, might have concerns about the candor in which people are communicating in. So, there's a lot of things to think about in terms of having these governance rules. I think we're also seeing tracking tools. More of that is happening in order to understand behaviors. We have the introduction of artificial intelligence and machine learning that is also, gathering patterns and information to use to protect information or to derive, some form of monetization of the data as a competitive attribute. So we are seeing that, and we're also seeing data moving to the cloud, right? I don't know if many of you are working on systems that are in the cloud and SaaS tools, or when they're hosted by vendors, but this is another area where companies are looking at because they're hosting our data. So another challenge area is also updating policies and procedures to make sure that we're also protecting our data through DLP or data loss prevention tools. I think creating rules and understanding thresholds in which to protect our data is also, projects that I think people are working on. And then e-discovery is also creating and modifying their capabilities to address the new technologies introduced. We're seeing legal hold preservation policies and procedures getting updated as mechanisms for preserving data in the event that there's potential or anticipated in actual litigation. And then the growing volumes of information with defensible data disposition initiatives and data minimization initiatives. And then there's also just plain old responding to changes in the laws and changes in our business practices, and being able to have information governance policies that govern that. So as you can see, the needs continue to change and they grow, and it takes an effort to stay on top of this. So I thought I'd take a moment and do a poll. I think you could probably respond to me through the chat. And
Yeah,
Dina, do you have some suggestions here?
You got a poll. I'm going to start joining the pack and entering in. So folks, if you happen to see the question that Sabrina has passed on the page, if you could please just type in your response in the chat. And we'll give a couple seconds for folks, Sabrina, to chime in on that. But
okay. Okay, so the question is, I'm wondering about the audience and if your organization has a formal information governance program. Yes, but no one follows.
Yep. So that's, I was just about to say, we're seeing in general, there is formal formation of an information governance group. It's actually in the works at some of the, one of the responses. I chimed in and said our actual information governance reports to finance, part of our records management team. Okay. Yeah, I think in general, you're seeing a consensus of folks kind of saying yes. That's great. That's great. So,
So in the data that I've looked at, it looks like about They did a survey in 2021, and 60% of the respondents have an IG program. It's up from 46% in 2018. So in a 3-year time period, it moved from 46 to 60%. So we're seeing more and more organizations with it. In 2021, 16% have a plan to establish one in 21 and 22, and 22% have an informal one. So, so you guys are ahead of the curve. Sounds like you got more than 60%. All right. Next question. Okay, if you have an IG program, what kind of initiatives do you have in flight? So you can respond with the alphabet. I know I probably had a long list here, but anyways, A, create or update training and awareness programs, campaigns. B, develop an IG governance model and framework. C, update policies and procedures. D is doing data cleanup. E is cybersecurity. F is privacy. G is e-discovery. And H, if you have H, it's other. Oh, okay.
All right, so I'm just checking, Sabrina, on some of the responses we're getting here. It seems like we've got a consistency of A, and so creating and updating training and awareness campaigns seems to be common.
Mm-hmm.
Developing information governance models and frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing much in the way of, obviously e-discovery initiatives. All of the above from Sherry. Do I have some C's? Yeah, you got kind of a mix.
We got some
here.
privacy, seeing a mix. I'm seeing at least more than
Cybersecurity.
one. Yeah, yeah.
I'm with Shirley. At AbbVie, our e-discovery is different. There was actually dialogue about a potential, merging, at least from a process or center of excellence of e-discovery and information governance, but ultimately turned out to be, they were separate functions.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a mix of the above. So it looks like almost
Mm-hmm.
everything's covered.
Yeah. I didn't see any H's in here, so. Okay, thank you. All right, so I pulled up some information on what other companies are doing in this space over the past 3 years. These are the types of projects that companies have completed according to the respondents. So the first one is about defining and implementing a corporate governance framework. So I think we're starting to see, charters developed, voting bodies, the collection of IG governance, steering committees and so forth. The second one came in at updating the email, info access, RIM, and legal hold policies and procedures. I think some of this too is, Microsoft has a lot more features in these areas as well. And if your organization uses Microsoft, perhaps you're starting to take advantage of some of the records management tagging, the legal hold tagging, and so forth here, along with email. Executing a comprehensive legacy data cleanup project, such as shared drives. That's at 35%. Also at 35% is defensible deletion of records that has met their lifecycle requirements. So I think the need to minimize our data is getting stronger. Then implemented new ECM, enterprise content management or content services systems. That's the fifth one. We've got implemented a new privacy awareness training program, updated legal hold notification, and implemented a security awareness training program. So I think, holistically, I think a lot of these projects are on people's radar. I also looked at what people wanted to do versus what they are doing. I thought this was a little interesting because on the right-hand side, you're seeing the IG projects that are planned for 2021 and 22, according to these respondents. So, and then on the left are the projects that they wish they could do. And I got to say, I like that wish list because it really focuses in on probably assuming that you had the money to do it and the permission to do it, to execute a comprehensive legacy data cleanup project and implement a new ECM system. So, you know, to me, that really speaks volumes in the sense that we want to clear out the past and build a new house, right? And you know, set up systems where we don't persist some of the problems we've seen from the past. You know, in addition to that, there's defensible deletion of records and content, updating email, and then implementing or upgrading DLP. On the right-hand side, the projects that are being planned for the coming year, you know, they seem to focus more on the policy and the training side, and which really speaks to the updating of existing policies themselves. And I think that, you know, that's your mainstay, right? That's the, you know, the constant thing that you're doing all the time, and needing to make sure that you're maintaining your systems and educating people. And I think, you know, many companies find themselves, you know, having a lot of new information to continue to keep people aware of how to protect information, especially in the cybersecurity space. And then there's defensible deletion and data consolidation and cleanup, which falls, you know, lower on the stack than it did in the wish list side. So some of you may be familiar with this model. This is the EDRM. And so I mentioned earlier that I started off in litigation support, and then did records management, then went into e-discovery consulting. So I've been around for a while, and I've seen this model change too. This model originally, on the left-hand side, that circle used to be records management, and then the right-hand side is really about the various processes that you know, are part of e-discovery, right? You have the identification, the preservation, collection, and so forth. And the left side of the wheel, or the wheel itself, evolved from being records management to be information management because of the need to expand to more data and information.
I'm the best.
Oh, I think I've got a little bit of, I got more audience feedback. Thank you. Can we mute the line?
That was a weird board, that third round.
Are we able to mute? Okay, thank you. And then it evolved from information management to information governance now. So the information governance wheel, we look over here. This model has been in place for several years, and this one has a unified governance framework. So, you know, basically infers that these organizations or these groups work together from the business side, privacy and security, IT, RIM, and legal. And then within the inner circle is really about the life cycle management and and those intersections with those groups. So this year, the IGRM model had put out a public comment for an update, because like everything in this space, so much is changing, and what does it mean in terms of who are we working with? And in this proposed change, it went through a public comment period that I think ended sometime in July. Their plan is to issue a final version in December. It added risk as a new grouping to what we had before. Risk isn't here. And then they split out security and privacy from the prior model. And I think, and then they're all equal size now. They're not, you know, larger for one area or another. And I think it's really looking at how we balance what we're looking at, and basically, you know, have a more global, larger version and vision of who is working, you know, towards this unified governance. And then within the life cycle sector, it's actually a little cleaner. It talks about protect, use, retain, and transfer. And then there's the creation that comes into that cycle, and then the disposal when it leaves it. So This version again is slated for publication in December of this year. So when I talked to Andre, he mentioned that many of you are very interested in process maturity models. So I thought I'd show this one. This one is a very popular model that's used, and this one is the CGOC, which is the Compliance, Governance, and Oversight Council. This is an organization that has been funded by IBM. It basically issued I guess over the years, different maturity models. And this one is based on the IGRM model itself. So it leverages the information governance reference model, and then it builds out for each of those groups, like for legal, RIM, privacy, security, and so forth, for each of them, the 5 levels of maturity. And it has a pretty extensive assessment tool. It happens to be one of the most popular ones as well. So if you're considering, looking at a maturity model to measure where your organization is and to identify gaps and levels of opportunity, that might be a good tool to use because it is pretty comprehensive. That includes all of those different organizations, from the IG reference model. Another model is based on ARMA. So ARMA has what they call the generally acceptable record keeping principles, GARP. And so GARP itself has a maturity model where you can also do assessments on your organization's maturity around things like integrity, access, accuracy, and so forth. And that's often used too. As it turns out, the Big Four have their own assessment tools like KPMG, Ernst & Young, and others. And then there's also the ISO standards for cybersecurity and privacy that also has assessment tools. All right. And last of all, I wanted to share some of the resources that I've used in these slides, but also other places where you can get more information to help you on your journey. There's the Information Governance World magazine, and this is part of, I would say, the SIGO certification. So I recently went through the SIGO boot camp. SIGO stands for Certified Information Governance Officer, and that SIGO certification came out last year. And it encompasses all of these areas that we've been talking about. And in any event, the SIGO Association has a relationship with ICRM, which is the organization that where a certified records manager gets their certification through. So I happen to be a SIGO and a CRM. And so a lot of this information is getting crossovers, which is very thankful about it because I think it's probably a very good direction for our field to learn more about these other areas of practice. The other one is the Information Governance Initiative, who hosts the SIGO Summit, and they're also a think tank in this space. Of course, the EDGM, the reference model for e-discovery, the IGRM, the reference model for information governance, CGOC, ARMA, and also AIM. And if you're not acquainted with AIM, AIM is also another established records management association that focuses in on imaging technologies. And they, like ARMA, they have bookstores in there. They've got a lot of webinars and also conferences and also other training materials on their site. So that kind of wraps it up for the resources that we have in this space. And I'm certainly open to questions from all of you on what we covered today.
Sabrina, I'll kick it off with a question here for you, and then maybe give some folks to kind of tee some of their thoughts up as well. I think I mentioned this to you last time we talked. Our company recently went through acquisition, and we're in the final stages of integration. And with respect to information governance particularly, we have a very different email retention policy between the two companies. So can you maybe share a little bit about your experience, what you do or what organizations you partner with to handle some of the change management aspects of implementing some IG policies? Like, oh my gosh, we're going to take your email away in your 25 years of email. Any advice that you'd have for some of us as legal ops professionals that are probably having to maybe overcome some of those same challenges in their company as well?
Yeah, I think, yeah, change management requires a lot of pre-planning. You know, it's probably 66% pre-planning, and the rest of it is actually executing it.
Oh yeah, I can click a button and the email's gone in 2 minutes.
I know. Whenever we're introducing new technology, the technology people say, this is the easy part, you know, you guys have to come up with the process part, you know, so that's very true. And when you take away somebody's cheese, obviously they're going to be a little upset about it. So I think when it comes to change management, you have to envision the full life cycle of what you're expecting people to do and for what you expect things to happen. So you actually have to go forward to think about what is that end state that you expect to be in, and then sort of work backwards. Some of the stuff, especially in records management, we deal a lot with temporal issues, time, because because you're asking yourself, hey, am I implementing something for the past and the future, or just the future only, right? Because they're different beasts entirely, especially if you're dealing with legacy data versus the future, right? So I think that I'm just trying to think of an example. So so part of it is just the pre-planning. Most of the time when we implement something, we want to make sure that we give people as much information as we can about what they can expect. Even to the extent of giving them examples, because there's the part of people who just want to get told, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? But then if you give them something that's, somewhat pre-planned, it gives them a chance to react to it, right? Because if you just tell them something vague, they won't get it.
Are you suggesting that if potentially we kind of lay out a timeline to say, listen, effective on, I'm just making up a hypothetical date.
Yeah, right.
Effective on January 1st, any emails that you receive after January 1st will be, we'll have the policy applied to it. So start getting into the mindset of what I need to do. And oh, by the way, we are now going to implement where effective March 1st, anything that was pre-1999 will be, is that the type of
archived or something, right?
Exactly. And then exactly. By the way, at April 1st, we're going up to 2010, and then effective March 1st, we're going to 220.
Yeah. But that's where that temporal part comes in, right? Because you're sort of dealing with that, because I think it's a shock to anybody's system. I don't know what your changes are, but let's say you're planning to turn on some auto delete function on the email, and it's shorter than what they're used to, or they've never had it before. So you do want to do the go forward, but then what do you do about the past? Because suddenly, let's just say you go to a 90-day cutoff, that meant that anything dated 91 days and longer just poof went away. So yeah, there has to be some provision to either tell people way in advance that this is coming so they can prepare and do something, like folder or archive somehow the older stuff in advance, so that when you lead up to the implementation date, they're not surprised.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
How about the rest of the audience? Feel free to chime in either on the chat itself, or feel free to unmute.
I think there's somebody who wants the slides. I'll gladly share the slides, or one of you can share it with them.
Thank you.
And Dina, this is Andre. As perform, the way we normally conduct these meetings is to have a presenter and questions or a panel discussion. The most important thing is actually just a collaboration across the team and people learning from each other. If there are not specific questions for the presentation. I mean, we would also be really interested in just what some of the IG projects that people are currently participating that you'd like to share so that we can do some cross collaboration.
Yeah.
Oh, great
Let
idea,
me,
Andre.
yeah, let me go back to the slide where there's like a list of projects, maybe this one. It sounds like, you know, there were folks who were actually here's the answer. So we saw a lot of people working on updating training and awareness campaigns, right? Is this the right one? Yeah. So, you know, A and B were pretty popular.
Hi, this is
Yeah.
Pete Stanisek, and I had a question. A lot of these things are things that we're working on. One of the things that I don't see mentioned, and it may be part of this, but I had a question on was kind of the concept of data mapping.
Okay.
And, you know, you get so many different stakeholders in these IG plans, and everyone has different ideas of what they need to do their work. And we've had a number of discussions about, listen, before we really get going down the path, we probably really need to understand where everything is, what everything is. And I think we struggle with that a little bit. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on how data mapping, or how you've seen data mapping fitting into
Yeah. Are you talking about, are you referring to data mapping for GDPR or for e-discovery?
Really, well, e-discovery, you know, I'm in legal ops. A big issue for our legal stakeholders is e-discovery. But you have our information security team that's also looking at labeling and categorization of data using kind of taxonomies, then discovery and things like that. We're trying to figure out a balance where we can come together, because I think we feel like, at least where we've gone, is there's just a lot of information out there. We're not entirely sure, you know, and even from a records perspective, it becomes very difficult to try to pay attention to information if you're not entirely sure what it is, or even the IT group isn't sure what it is and how it links back to retention. So there's just a lot of different things here.
Yeah.
I don't have a specific question. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that process.
Yeah. I think it's I think one thing is to really fight the urge to boil the ocean, because there's just so much out there that is it gets to be quite a task to undertake it. So a lot of the ways that I think about this is about the risk and trying to prioritize, you know, what's important for us to understand what we have and where it is. It's so complicated now, because with data moving to third-party sources and other locations, it's, you know, how do we get a handle on it? And I know that for us, we actually manage it from a process as opposed to from a technology at this moment, at least from my program. Our program actually asks the stakeholders, all of the different areas of the business, to identify the records that they manage and are custodians of. From that perspective, they have to, you know, aside from identifying it, they need to classify it. And so it's kind of coming in from the groups themselves to articulate it. Now, so it doesn't have that level of accuracy, but it has a level of control in terms of accountability for what we do know we have. And then from there, it's also coming through similar processes of where people understand what their classifications are for them to assign, you know, the sensitivity class. Now, there are tools out there that can do some of this. I think it's still probably, you know, through machine learning and AI to do like scanning, like file analysis, to, you know, automate some of that classification. I think I'm still on that journey, so I don't know how reliable or how long it will take to become reliable. But you know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of false positives before we get there, and I think it's just a lot, you know, to feel confident in. So I get back to the people in the organization and their level of responsibility to manage the risks associated with this.
Yeah, no, it sounds familiar. We've started
Yeah.
some tools out there that do scanning and different things like
Yeah.
that. You actually use you know, the same term that we've used around, you know, being careful about boiling the ocean and just and doing too
It's
much.
just so much.
And
It's just so much.
so
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. When I hear people talking about it, I think, okay, you know, you're probably 2 years out from that project. And so you think you can do this,
Right.
but when you get into it, I think it's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've done some scanning to do a data migration, and you know, I fell in that. I thought, oh, cool. You know, the data, the scanning can just tell me all the metadata. I can figure this out. You know, it's going to be easy. But when you get down into the weeds of these things, it's there's a lot of little decisions to make, and you're not sure if it's the right one. So, you know, again, you get into that IG model where you reach out to all these people and say, okay, tell me what you understand, what you know, so we can figure out, you know, the best next step for us. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. I see that Kevin mentioned that they are retiring an email archive. Thank you for that. I have another general question for the audience. Sabrina, as my colleague, really, I am just thinking how to articulate it, but when we start to talk about IG governance, she is definitely a champion. She's very, very knowledgeable. What I would be interested in knowing, as far as the people who submitted their responses for the types of initiatives that they have underway, I really appreciate sort of the cross section of responses. You know, how this resonates with you and some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing in some of your programs, just to get a little bit of dialogue there.
Mm-hmm. I think Kevin had a good question here about pushback.
I see that. Yes. Would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I run. See them coming. No, but it's you know, it's an art too, how you deal with that, right? So so that pinwheel actually shows you also who's on this side of the decision and who's on this side of the decision. And so we get this every now and then. So we manage the records retention schedule. And so, you know, we'll talk to a group, say, okay, this is your number, you know, this is how many years you can keep this. And they say, hey, that's not long enough, you know, I need it for all these other reasons. And so BI can be one of them, right? Because somebody wants to analyze this. And it's kind of interesting. Every now and then I get actually asked by folks outside of the company, you know, like how to handle the BI question. So I think that's interesting. And I think there's a lot of I think part of it is understanding the legal obligation you have with the data you have, and do you have the right to use it for, you know, for a purpose that you didn't disclose. And so I think it kind of goes back to that. It depends on, especially if some organizations may want to monetize their data and some organizations may want to find insight into the data to help them either with product development or something else. So there's a lot of reasons why some organizations may want to keep it longer. And I think it goes back to king is the law. So it has to be legal. So I think it really drives down to what is our legal obligation or your legal obligation to retain and destroy that data. And that would be the, you know, the ultimate decider. I hope that helps, Kevin.
And it's interesting because I used to work in a heavily regulated industry. And so you're right, the legal aspect kind of pushed back to the business. But as these new AI tools keep coming out, the vendors keep suggesting that they can gain some business insight to the data if you keep it longer. And so if you're not in a heavily regulated industry, it's harder to push back on the business.
Yeah. So yeah, it would depend on where the lawyers fall out on that, and if it's up to the business to see if that's a risk that they can take. I mean, I think it's I think it gets back to your organization's, decision makers, right? But yeah, it gets into tricky ground. Kevin, you had another question, retiring an email archive now that you have Microsoft 365.
Yeah,
Can
so
you
that wasn't
can you
as much
elaborate?
that wasn't
Oh,
as much
okay.
a question as much
Oh,
as a
okay.
project that we're undergoing, and what do we do with that data? The impact with e-discovery.
Yeah.
Do we fold it into Office 365? How much do we fold in? So those are some of the challenges that we're going through right now.
Yeah, that's a pretty big task. Yeah, I've heard some companies use like file analytics to, if you're culling that data to understand what you need to keep, what you don't need to keep, that some companies have used file analytics to help solve for some of that.
Well, Sabrina, I
Yeah.
think yep, that was Andre's. I think we will take this as an opportunity to first thank you for presenting.
You're welcome.
Very informative topic. We appreciate everyone's willingness to share some of their in-flight IG projects as well and some of their challenges. And your insight was very valuable to us. I'm going to quickly make an announcement that we will be giving you back this time in December. We hope the entire PPKM IG group has a great holiday season. Stay safe, stay well, enjoy friends and family. This has been a great year. I mean, at least respect to IG, it's been a challenging year, obviously on the personal front for most of us, but it's nice to have the opportunity to convene all together at this spot, same place, same time on Tuesdays. We are looking forward to 22. We've got a couple of different topics we want to still get to and talk about. Change management is definitely in the forefront. We are trying to gather a speaker to do a presentation from a company called LaMarche Group on change management. So look for that to be coming up. And before we lose too many more folks, I'm going to give the floor back to KJ to make any final announcements. So to that point, we're going to be canceling December's meeting. But KJ, anything else you want to add?
Thank you so much, Dina. So just a couple things really quickly. The first, and I may have mentioned this on a previous call, but the 2021 benchmarking reports are out. ACC and MSite have partnered to produce benchmarking reports that provide legal department leaders and human resources professionals with salary and other compensation data, covering a vast array of in-house positions and company sizes. You can find information about that on the ACC website at acc.com. And there's a specific, you have to purchase the full report, but there is a legal operations highlights report that's free that you can download from the website. So I invite you to take advantage of that. And then the second thing that I want to mention is our diversity, equity, and inclusion report is out as well. And that's, it's a maturity model. That maturity model is kind of built on the same framework as our previous ACC legal operations maturity model, but of course with the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Both that and the compensation reports are featured on our homepage. So if you just go to acc.com, you can get them both there. And that's all that I have.
Excellent. Thanks, KJ. And thank you again, Sabrina. Thank you, Andre. Again, wishing you all a very happy and safe and healthy holiday season. And we are looking forward to our January meeting. We'll see you in the new year.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, everybody. It's
Thank
nice meeting
you.
everybody.
And
Take
thank
care.
you, Sabrina. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you.